Hello, my name is Joey Gartin, and I'm a content designer and user researcher at Renfrewshire Council, which in terms of the UK population is a pretty mid-sized local authority over in the west of Scotland, outside Glasgow. I'm just curious, are there any other content or research people here today? Okay, oh, I got you, okay, you're my people. But I think that my goal is the insights I'm going to share with you I think will be relevant to everyone, because we all, as we were talking about just on the last presentation, people work together. So hopefully you find it interesting. For my intro, rather than you looking at this nice branded slide, I'm going to show you a picture of my cat, because I have this thing where I'm physically incapable of speaking to people without mentioning my cat, as some people on the break can attest to. But I know that statistically most of you will be dog people. So I've accounted for you as well. And I have a reason for showing this, because the cat is mine, but the dogs belong to my boss, Philippe. And anyone here who is eagle-eyed, who is looking at the DrupalCon website the last few weeks, will have noticed that Philippe was actually meant to be speaking to you today about this, but unfortunately he was really unwell and he couldn't make it. So I was recruited at the last minute, which is great for me because I've learned a lot today. But there's a pro and a con. The pro is that everything Philippe was going to tell you is in my brain and on these slides, so you're not going to miss out on any of the insights. But the con is that unlike Philippe, I don't have a French accent. And as your reaction confirms, everything is cooler with a French accent. So other than that, I promise you will get the full effect. But you don't want to hear my attempt at that. Now, you know what? I'm just going to leave the animals up while I keep talking. My goal today is to give you as much practical, tangible information as possible. I'm going to be talking to you about how we rebuilt our entire council website using the philosophy of OOUX, or object-oriented user experience. Can you raise your hands if you're familiar with OOUX? I know James is, because we also work with Manifesto. A few hands. Just for contrast, can you raise your hand if you're not familiar with OOUX? Okay, this is even better. This means hopefully you won't be bored and you'll find it interesting. But whether you are inspired by this and you're like, wow, I want to adopt OOUX into what I'm doing, or not, I think that everyone will be able to take away a few useful nuggets that hopefully you can just apply in whatever project you're working on. So that's the goal. So let's get started. Now, a bit of background information is that we didn't just want a new website. Like many of you, we really, really needed one. I was really relating to the Cambridge chat earlier, because at the council, it's 25 years worth of online stuff. So we also had hundreds of websites on, I don't even know how many different CMSs. It was a very sprawling landscape. And was providing a bad user experience. But just focusing on the main council website, I can give you a bit of background. Over 2 million users every year, most of them coming from organic search. Out of that, over 6 million page views, which, again, we're a mid-sized local authority, but considering the population of Scotland is less than 6 million, it's quite a lot of visibility. And I wanted to point out over 70% on mobile devices, which I don't think will be shocking to anyone in this room, but I didn't include it for filler. I wanted to mention it because what we learned was that, if you think of senior decision makers that you're asking for money or trying to get buy-in or convince them, they'll have, their own phone or they'll use a tablet at home. But at work, most of them are sitting with a laptop or a big desktop screen. And I think that it can be hard for people not in the UX design space to remember that what they're seeing when they're at work isn't necessarily what people are seeing on the little vertical screen. So we really repeated this stat a lot just to emphasize that people are mostly, but not exclusively, on a phone. From those big numbers that you saw there, we drive thousands of direct contacts from the website to other channels, our customer service call center, people who work in policy services, the people at the council who actually interact with the public. The problem is, most of the time, whenever those people get in touch with us asking for work to be done, 9 times out of 10, they're saying, we get so many emails, we get so many phone calls, we want to reduce that. And they come with a ready-made solution, which is, can you just remove our contact details from the website? Which is not in the spirit of UX. So we don't do that, but that itself is almost a diagnosis. It's showing that people are landing on a service's content or information, but then it's not answering whatever their question was, it's not helping them, it's not getting them what they need to do. So then they get in touch because they're annoyed and they want to speak to someone. So that's one of the big problems that we had with our main website. We also have loads of other channels. We send physical letters to people, we send emails to people. There's our customer service unit advisors who speak to people on the phones. And we also recently introduced, it's called Millie, an AI chatbot that people, when they phone up, that's the first point of contact that they're speaking to. I'm scared. I don't like robots because I watched Battlestar Galactica as a kid, so I don't endorse this, but that's what it is. The problem is, whether you're getting a letter, whether you're speaking to someone on the phone, again, 9 times out of 10, if the problem isn't addressed right then, all these other channels just send people back to the website. For example, if you're speaking to the AI chatbot on the phone, if your problem's not solved, the person gets sent via text a link to the website. But as I've already established, the website isn't a good source of information for people, so it was this really bad loop that was causing lots of unhappy people in Renfrewshire. Now, these are the numbers. I've got a few quotes because we spoke to hundreds and hundreds of people over the last few years to find out what do they actually say or think about the website. One person said, I avoid it if I don't have to use it, which, to be honest, that sounds very reasonable to me. I avoid my council website if I don't have to use it. But when you drill down into it, it's more sinister. So people say it's hard to find stuff on the website. Someone said, the information is there, but finding it takes a long time. And then the real kicker for me was, once they've found the information, they say it's hard to understand. So whether someone is not even able to find the thing, or whether they find it and they just don't understand it, we have lots of unhappy people who, as is their right, are very vocal in telling us that they're unhappy. So it was a big problem, and no one was really happy. So here is our former website in all of its glory. It was pretty much a standard council website. It didn't look particularly great, but what really matters is the user experience. But as we've established, that also wasn't great, so no one was really happy. And especially on mobile, you can see here, this is just a topic page with a list of pages you can click. Even me, who has probably worked on many of these pages, it makes my head start to spin. I don't like looking at it. So I really can't blame people for the problems that they were having. When saying, okay, we're going to do a new website, start from the ground up, how can we fix the last 25 years of chaos and Wild Westness? We wanted it to align with how people actually think in real life. And the reason I say that is to contrast with, we didn't want to do what the old website was, which was essentially mirroring the organizational structure of the council. Basically, if you look at the hierarchy or org chart of the people that work there, that's plastered onto the website in terms of IA. So that might make sense to those of us who are familiar with that, but not to the people who actually use it. So we were like, right, how can we actually achieve this very nice goal? And the answer was OOUX. The answer was OOUX. Oh, there it is. Okay, what is it? Acronym. I'm going to explain it in a way that I think makes sense because, again, I'm not a super technical person. I like words and pictures and that sort of thing. So this was how it was explained to me, and I was like, you know what, that actually kind of makes sense. The way that we introduce it to people is using an example called the Tesco analogy. So if you think, okay, there's Tesco, it's a photo of different aisles, and above the aisles are different signs that say things like sauces, canned foods, rice, eggs, cakes. This is basically what you expect when you go into a shop. And that makes sense to people. If this doesn't make sense to you, I'd be very interested in what shops you are visiting, because this is pretty much what they tend to do. And this is organizing around the way people think, because people think in objects or nouns. Here's a mock-up of what it would look like if all the signs were verbs instead. You'd have aisles like boiling and frying and baking and pickling. I came up with all these myself, by the way. Unpickling is my favorite. But if you went into a shop, you'd be like, oh, how am I supposed to find what I'm looking for? Like if you go into boiling, for example, you could find eggs, because you boil eggs. You could find, I don't know, meat. I'm vegetarian. Do you boil meat? I don't even know. Like, you can, it'd be like, well, I don't even know what's in there. You could find a kettle, because you boil, water in a kettle. But if you're a customer, if you see a carton of eggs next to a few brands of kettles, it doesn't make any sense. Why are those two things next to each other? So that's how our website was organized. We wanted to move from task-based, action-based categories and go to object-based categories. And I want to say for my fellow content people in the room, don't panic. I'm not talking about no verbs in page titles or no actions like that. We still have pages called things like apply for a bin or whatever. I'm talking about the way we structure the website and organize our information. So this essentially is OOUX visualized. We want to move from the action-based thinking and go over to objects. Now, I think that this is probably what happened 2 or 25 years ago whenever people first made the council website, is you have an idea, but then over time it balloons up into something that's really unmanageable. So what we wanted to do, working with James's team at Manifesto, was understand what are our objects going to be before we actually did anything. We didn't want to have really nice, pretty designs and then try to fit our content into it and it not work. So our tasks were identify what all of our objects are, identify the relationships between those objects, make a full list of any possible call to action that someone might want to do on the council website, and then get into the nitty-gritty of what are all the attributes or the details that make up all of those objects. And I'm going to make that tangible on the next slide for you in a second, but just to say, we did do a lot of groundwork, foundations, basically like our year zero, I guess. We looked at all the data we had. I and other people on the team did multiple rounds of user research. We spoke to people face-to-face, online, anonymously, just to find out, do people really think in objects? We looked at outside subject matter expertise. I can really recommend for anyone who is interested in learning more about this, Sophia Prater is one of the main figures in the OOUX space, and she's got lots of good resources online that you can look up. And then also competitor analysis. And when I say competitors, I don't mean other councils. I mean other organizations that have done OOUX and have done it well. And one example that you might want to look up is the City of Sydney in Australia. Their website is organized around objects. And even just like navigating it, like I was, just testing it out, it really is more intuitive and easier to use in terms of you're finding what you're looking for straight away without really even having to think, okay, how do I find this? I'm not going to go into it, but that's a good example if you're curious about more. But to get more specific, I said we needed to identify our objects. I'm going to give you a few examples of what I mean by that at a council. So the biggest one for us is service. So people come to the council and they utilize our services. This is basically anything that we offer people or force upon people in some cases at a council. And within an object, there's different object types. So a service includes things like service requests, which could be applying for a garden waste permit, or complaints, which we get less of now, thankfully, but used to get a lot of. Registration, payment to the council, license, anything people are coming to us and saying, I need to get a thing done, that's a service. Another big one for us, and this might be something that any organization could have, is publication. This is basically information that's a resource that they can utilize, but isn't necessarily a product that they're wanting to use. So for us, that was things like case studies, guides, I mentioned earlier, bin calendars, which are the bane of my life, but we're getting there. Lists, policies, reports, terms and conditions, basically anything that is informational content rather than service-led. And another biggie for us is financial support. So benefits, discounts, like council tax discounts, for example. Reductions, grants, schemes, subsidies. These are just a few examples. Within each object, there are many object types. And we've got about a dozen key objects on the website. But the reason I want to show you this, and I know it would be different for each of your organizations, but the idea here is that everything we offer to people and every piece of content, every individual page on our website is labeled internally with one of these object categories. And the reason for that, which I'll share in a little bit in more detail, is we no longer want people to do like they did for, as I said, decades before, which is someone has written a page in their policy area, they go on to the CMS and they copy-paste it. Whenever everyone does that, we have thousands and thousands of slightly different pages. Each service is formatted a little differently. Every publication is unique to whoever wrote it. So it's inconsistent for people, and it makes it hard to find because everyone has a different writing style. So this helps make it a lot more consistent. Another key thing we had to ask ourselves is, what are the relationships between these objects? So for example, does a service link to one or more other services? Or if someone is reading a guide, which is a publication, does it make sense to refer them to certain financial support that's available related to that topic? Again, what we don't want is people to not find the information that they're looking for. So organizing this takes a lot of work, so I'm going to show you some screenshots of how we do that in a minute. And it all starts with our domain model. This is basically the roadmap of how we organize all of that information on the website. And it's not just IA, but that's what this screenshot is here. This is from our new homepage. And I think for users who are suddenly coming on a website that looks different and is different colors and design and all that, this doesn't look super unfamiliar. It's basically a list of what you would expect to find on a council website. But the difference is this does not reflect our organization's internal hierarchy anymore. This is totally based around information that people would expect to find using that object-oriented approach. An example that I can give you is, if you look on the left side, third one down is called Bins and Recycling, which is our most visited section because, again, that's one of those things that is basically forced upon people. They've got to use it. Before, on our old website, all the bins and recycling content was in the same section as all of our climate change information, stuff about nature restoration, land management. And that's because within our organization, there's a division called Environment. And within that team, that's where all the waste teams are, but that's also where all the climate change, nature, all of that stuff is. And as a user, it makes no sense to be trying to find out what you need to put in your bin, and next to it is something about river restoration is lovely, but it doesn't make sense to have it next to there. People would be like, what is this? So we split all that out. And that's why a few of my questions were about how did you convince people, because for us it just took years of pestering people until I think many of them were like, you know what, just do what you want to do. So we did get there in the end. I think I'm just going to touch on this, a system model. So for me, because as I said, I'm not a developer, this might be very familiar to many of you, but for me at first it was a big concept to get my head around. And the way it was explained to me, which is now how I explain it to people in our organization, is that the domain model is the roadmap, the system model is how do you actually do the thing. This is an enormous piece of information that we have. But I'm going to talk you through how we organize it and then how we actually use it day to day. So if you look at the screenshot, this is from Figma, where we organize all of it. And this is where we have the full list of all of our objects, so topic, service, financial support, job listings, events, stuff like that. And from there, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to. I know bins are fascinating, but I don't want to talk about it too much today. But we get really specific in terms of smaller objects nested within them, different types of bin, different types of contact details, waste items, so plastic bottles and grass trimmings. Those are all sub-objects that we have to deal with. Basically, everything is labeled so that nothing is just created from scratch. You base it within the information we have here. It's basically a template, depending on what object type you're working with. To keep track of all of it, because as I said, it's a lot of information, we use Notion, so that basically, if you forget anything, if someone new joins the team, we have it all cataloged so that you don't have to remember this stuff from scratch every time. And what I really want to talk about is these first 3 columns here on the left, which in Notion are just one big column, but I've broken it up for you. This is the system model in action, and this is what I use on pretty much a daily basis now. So the example I've given is our financial support object. But all the other objects I mentioned, so service, topics, events, they all have their equivalent of this. And this is essentially a template that lists every single item that people would expect to find if they're looking at a piece of content for this object type. And I think that it looks like a lot of information, but when you dive down into it, if I'm starting at the top on the left, we've got title, description, cover image, amount, opening date, closing date. These are all just little pieces of information that are 1 line max. So it's not that we're having bigger bloated pages. If anything, a lot of our pages are smaller than they used to be because it gets to the point of what people need rather than someone writing their life story on a web page. But what really interests me is once you get farther down, we see how this manifests as headings for the user. So every financial, sorry, I was at karaoke last night. Every financial support page has headings that say what it is, who can get it, how much they can get, and then really important is what you need to know before you apply, how to apply, and what you need to know after you apply. And I think from a content perspective, that last section, what you need to know after you apply, that was missing from almost all of our pages on our website. People would get in touch. Like I said, they would phone us, they would email us, and they would say, how long do I have to wait till I hear? Or who's going to decide this? Or what if something changes and I need to update my application? These were things that were just not represented on the website because a lot of services at the council didn't want people to ask about these things. So ironically, didn't mention it on the website. But if you include it on the website, no one's going to ask about it. So this is better for our users, but better for our teams as well. Now, what we've got on the left here is what it looks like mapped out in Figma. What we have in the middle is what this looks like what this looks like on a web page. So you can see really clear headings, really clear call to action buttons. It's not information overload. As I said, this is not just better for our customer service teams because they're having to speak to fewer people. It's better for our users. They're getting the information they need most of the time straight away. This is what it looks like in the Drupal CMS. And I wanted to show you this because I get choked up when I talk about this because this is my favorite new feature that we have, which is if you look at all the fields and all the buttons on the Drupal side, there are little red asterisks, which means this information is mandatory. We didn't have this before, and I really like this because, as you can see, it makes me so emotional to talk about because you cannot publish a page without filling in these categories now. So no one around the council, whether it's me or someone who works in one of our services, no one can just copy-paste what they've written anymore. It's impossible to have a page that doesn't meet all of the object criteria, which is a real game changer for us. So I'm going to grab a drink of my water and let you bask in the glory of our Drupal CMS. 1 second. Thank you. Cool. So in terms of what this looks like in the CMS, so if I'm going in to add a piece of content, this is our menu in Drupal. I click content, and before I can add anything, I basically have to decide what my object type is. You can't just have a blank page and start editing straight away. You have to decide, is it a service, or is it a topic, or is it consultation? And I think that's really important because, as I said, that is the gatekeeping. That stops people from being able to just swoop in and basically do like what we had before, which is total Wild West content. Another interesting thing that has made a big difference for us is having reusable components available in Drupal. So before, I would often have people get in touch and say, our phone number has changed, or we've got a new email address, can you update that? And as a content person, it was miserable because that might be on a dozen different pages on the website, and I don't know which ones they are. So I'd have to go find what they are and then manually update them. Whereas now, we can create a reusable contact card, for example, for a service. So if they've changed their phone number, I just update that one piece of content, and then it updates automatically everywhere. So this is more efficient and saves a lot of resource as well, which for me, who doesn't really like manually updating phone numbers and email addresses, this was a big game changer for me too. Now, as I said, I'm not a developer, but I didn't want to neglect the dev side of things because I knew that would be what a lot of you are interested in. So I'm going to do something a little unusual, and I'm going to just read from my notes for this one slide, so I can touch very briefly on what happened, behind the scenes dev-wise. And if you have any more questions about it, Liam, our lovely developer, is here today, so I'm sure he'd be happy to chat about it over lunch or something. But here's just a nod to what was happening behind the scenes. So lovely Liam, he took all the designs that our interaction designer did in Figma, and he used the software Storybook, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, to essentially create like a catalog of all of our reusable components. So things like call to action buttons, font styles, icons, text fields, anything that users basically see or interact with on the site. From there, he'd send this to Chromatic for version control. So this is what you see here. Basically testing the accessibility of our components. And then these would go to GitHub, where our lovely dev agency, who you've heard about today, would essentially be kind of like the final stop, almost like the border control or the passport check. Before any component can get through, they basically do a final check to make sure that it's ready to go before it gets moved to the live site. Now, I will say that was very top level from my one paragraph of notes. There's a lot more detail to it than that, but I think you'll be more familiar with that, so it's probably for the best that I gave you a bit more insight into the content side of things today. And here's what it looks like on the live website. This is just a page we have live now, and all that detail you could see in the domain model and in the system model, and then how that renders back in Drupal. And this is what it looks like to the user, which again is nothing wildly different than what they would expect to see. It looks nicer than our old website was, but the key thing here is the information. Because this is a financial support object, any type of information they would expect to see is represented on this page. And we didn't just come up with this all from scratch. As I said, we did countless hours of in-person, face-to-face, online, and anonymous user research. We relied on examples of other websites that have made the switch to OOUX, and just continual feedback, because another feature that we have on Drupal that we didn't have before is on any web page that a user is looking at, they can now click a button and tell us what they think. And I can confirm that as time has gone on, the feedback has really made the shift from negative to positive, which is nice for me as the person who looks at the feedback, but I think is a testament to the fact that this isn't just a nice idea that we've done. It really has made a difference. And we've had different service teams report back to us that they have had fewer people getting in touch with complaints, which again, great for the user, but great for us as well. And so there's our new website homepage, contrasting with the one you saw before. And I think my key takeaway here, aside from the fact that I've learned it makes me so emotional to speak about the beauty of OOUX, is from the user's point of view, they don't think anything about it. There's nothing radically different here. It's all under the hood. So again, every single one of these links, every single page you could possibly find on our website now uses this OOUX approach. So it's a totally different way of working and finding information. But from the user's point of view, they're just happy that they don't have to phone or email us as much. They just want to get on with their day, which I think is a very reasonable expectation. So on that note, that's the end of the talk. I'm happy to keep speaking. I love the rasp in my voice. I think it's a new thing for me. But I do want to say, yeah, if you have any questions or ideas or feedback or comments, if you tried anything similar in your own organizations, we'd definitely be interested, because I think Renfrewshire is the first local authority website in the UK to make the full switch to OOUX. So I'd be curious if anyone else has dipped their toes in the water or would like to try it for themselves. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes for questions. I don't know if anyone has any. I see a tentative hand up there. Yes? Well, James.
Duck. Hi, Jerry.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for the talk. I think the main question everyone wants to ask is, what were you singing at karaoke last night?
Oh, definitely Pink Pony Club, Chapel Roan. That's the go-to song these days. Would you believe this is every piece of user research I did, people just wanted to hear about my karaoke preferences. So what can I say?
You could give us a rendition over lunch.
I don't think I'm physically capable of doing that right now, but I appreciate the request, yeah.
So my main question was about, you ended the talk about saying that sort of from a user's perspective, not much has changed, it's not hugely radical. For a content editor, probably is quite a big shift. So it's almost like the complexity is now on content editors. You've got 12, did you say 12 content types? Sort of base
at least 12,
types, and then probably lots of components, and then, you know, when you're creating a page, there's quite a lot of processes to go through. I guess, how does that feel? It sounds like you appreciate that structure. But are you also working from a very centralized content team? So with some councils, it'll be quite devolved, some it'll be very centralized. Does it almost inform the fact that you have you've gone down this approach because you are probably a very centralized content team?
I can answer both of those. I think the first one about how it feels as an editor is, it's, to be honest, easier than ever. The tricky part was all the work that went into it and deciding how do we decide what are all the many facets of a specific object. But as, you know, say I didn't work on that and I didn't know anything about it, it doesn't really matter because in the Drupal editor, it's still just text fields. The only difference is you kind of need to have an awareness of, okay, what sort of information am I going to be asked for, rather than going away, writing your own page, and expecting to copy paste it in, when actually you can't do that because it's all these distinct individual fields now. So I think it's not been a problem for us, partly because we have, to address your second question, been moving to a more centralized approach. You might have noticed I asked a few questions like, how did other people get on trying to convince people? Because for us it was a years-long process. We had all these different sub-websites, and teams had been running their own sites for years, or people were still creating new things. And so in moving people, almost funneling them toward having a single source of truth, that was the real challenge. It wasn't necessarily once you get to the editing stage. It was more just convincing people in the first instance that we needed to do this. So it's been a learning curve, but I think once people get into it, they realize it's actually easier to use. That's what convinces people. Yeah.
Thank you. We have.
I've got one actually.
Yep.
Sorry.
One last one.
Thinking about the content structures that you've got and the content types, and you said you're the first council in the UK to sort of take this approach, as far as you know. Obviously, LocalGov Drupal is around not not reinventing the wheels. It sounds like all of the work that you've done in terms of those data structures are equally appropriate to any council, potentially, and so they might not need to go through the same process of making those decisions. Would you say that is the case? Or would other councils want to have a slightly different object approach?
So I would expect other UK councils would be very, very, very similar. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're wanting to speak to people about it and get the word out, because we couldn't just emulate entirely what people had done in other countries. So I mentioned City of Sydney in Australia. They've taken the OOUX approach, and as I said, you can pretty much tell straight away it's more intuitive, people can find information easier. But the services that they offer are different than the services that we offer. Or like local government, where I grew up in the US, they don't offer bin collection, for example. You have to pay for that yourself. So you can't really lift and shift from what other countries have done. I like the idea of saving other people the work, and maybe they can lift and shift from what we've done. So we're definitely keen to put that out there, because there's always a bit of nuance, but I expect it would be very similar. Yeah.
Okay, thanks again, Zoe.
Thank you.